Welcome to MRE Uncut, where we'll give you real and practical insights into the real estate scene in Melbourne. We'll discuss what's happening in the industry, all backed by MRE's history of over 30 years in the game. With that said, let's jump into this week's episode of MRE Uncut.
So welcome back to another MRE podcast. My name's Stephen Fitzsimon. I'm here with Peter Hooymans.
G'day, Steve. Hello, everyone.
And today we're looking at a strengths-based approach to scaling your business.
We are indeed.
So, Peter,
Takes us back.
It does take us back. It takes
Long
back
time.
before I was around. You tell the story, mate.
All right, I'll start. Strengths-based approach was something that was put to me, I'm going to say 2004, formative days. We might have been 3 people or something like that. And at the time, we commissioned a coach. It was a great guy, actually, named David Brown, who had a company called Hooymans Equity. And Dave would talk to me about scaling. And at the time, we were selling sort of these buildings per our previous podcast, 100 apartments, 120 apartments. And he was like, what if you could do 2 of those? I said, well, I can't. There's not enough of me. And he said, yes, we have to scale. I said, how do we do that? He said, okay, firstly, we need to work out your traits and your strengths. What are they, And I said, well, how do we do that? And he proposed at the time we did what was called then a psychometric test, pretty common.
Was it common back then, though?
Oh, that was, I think Caliber's been around for 40 or 50 years. Oh. So psychometric testing, I think, has been around for a long time, but probably not in the mainstream sense.
In real estate too.
I'd never heard of it. And I did ask him, I said, what's it about? Oh, well, in short, your core traits as a human being are essentially etched in stone from the age of 5 or 6. So core traits such as urgency, empathy, influence, your abstract reasoning, just to name a few. I can't think of all the traits at the moment.
External structure, internal
structure.
So
we did my caliper, and no surprise, I was, from memory, 100 out of 100 for urgency, which is the same as you.
Doesn't surprise me.
Which is a bit of a curse in a way, right? So everything has to be done yesterday. I was high on influence and a few other things that obviously aligned with being in real estate sales. But at the time, what we needed for me was support. Support around, okay, great to do the sale, but then you've got to do the contracts and you've got to get the deposits banked and do the reconciliation, the trust accounting. And I really hated all that.
Yeah,
all
that goes against the grain.
I didn't like that part.
Yep.
So that's when he convinced me to do my own caliper and to use that as a benchmark, if you like, for the next employee that we would hire, which happened to be Anne Rogers. And when we did Anne's caliper, super interestingly, her urgency was, let's say, 70. I think on my caliper, I think my thoroughness was like 40. So good at doing deals.
That's not too bad.
You're good at doing deals, but not so good at doing the photocopying, if you know what I mean.
Correct.
Or the little other bits and pieces. Anne's thoroughness, I remember, was like 95.
Yeah.
Anne's detail, 90. Anne's empathy was 90. So all the skills I was not quite great at, Anne was fantastic at.
Yeah.
So then we had this when we overlaid the 2 caliper reports, we had this sort of like match made in heaven.
So Anne's role was then to do all of the stuff that you were no good at, and you could continue doing the stuff that you were good at.
Correct. Exactly. So that was really I think from memory, that was 2006. And that was like a light bulb moment for us. And I would say, because I was such a skeptic of the whole concept, I really didn't believe in it. When I saw the results on the paper translate into reality, which was probably a few years later after we'd calipered 8 or 9 people, including yourself, I really not only became a believer, I became a evangelist.
Rusted on.
Of caliper. It was like, if you don't do caliper, and you would remember this period of time in the business where we were essentially if we liked you in the interview and you did, you were coming on board, you had to do caliper. And if the caliper report didn't give you a match that said you can do the role that we're looking for, you didn't get the gig.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly, also, while we're on it, leads me to the part of the story which would be a decade after we started using caliper, where maybe I think we were growing so fast, we had a couple of people that were line ball on the caliper, but we interviewed them and we liked the resume looked good, the presentation was pretty good.
And I think they had a track record in the role in other businesses as well.
That as well. So that's always a little bit, that throws you a bit, because you're like, well, if they could do it there, why can't they do it here?
Yeah.
And then we'd caliper them, and then the psychologist would ring us from caliper and say, mate, don't even think about it. This match is a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
And what would happen? You tell what happened next.
Well, unfortunately, there were stages where we still proceeded with them.
Yeah. Why though?
I think it was the circumstances around the market, and also they were really good people, and so we
liked them.
We liked them.
Yeah. Which is like literally
what you shouldn't do.
It's
in
literally
business.
the worst reason to employ anybody.
Yeah.
Because you like them.
Yeah. They're a great bloke.
Or you got on with
girl.
them, or girl, or whatever.
Yeah. They like red wine.
Yeah, which was a common theme back in the day, right? If you if you could talk red wine, which is my pet project, you're in.
You're in.
Yeah.
Get on board the bus.
That's it. So interestingly, when we would go against the caliper, we'll give them a job anyway. And geez, that bit us.
It did.
Yeah. And I would say, off the top of my head, and I'm sure caliper, if we called them, would have some deeper stats for us, but I'm going to say 90% of caliper profiles we did that weren't a match, that we subsequently then employed, ended up as a failure.
Yeah, I think it'd be close to that.
And in reverse, of the people we employed where the caliper was a strong match,
I think it'd be the same thing in reverse.
The success rate and the sort of the success rate of the role, etc., would be high, 90% or 80%.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think I remember one candidate that came in a few years ago, and their caliper was very strong, but they just couldn't do the commute, and it was gutting because we knew that person was going to be good.
Can we say their name?
I don't think it'd be the right thing to do.
Okay.
But she was from an outer suburb in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Coming in for a property management role.
Okay.
And came in and did the commute for like 3 weeks and just sort of went, I can't do an hour and 15 in the car to get into work. And we recognised that
I think
initially.
I remember that one.
It was always a red flag for us if you had to go too far, because you lose some like that. Others are fine.
Yeah.
It's some you lose like that.
Because for those listening, at the time we might have been doing 1 or 2 calipers a week, trying to get through to maybe one great candidate a month, which is only 10 a year, let's say, which if you're growing a business like we were at the time, we spoke a few weeks ago about putting on 1,000 properties in a year. Yeah. Right. That's a lot of people in leasing, property management, admin. It's at least probably a dozen people. So we needed to put on a person a month. But there's one particular caliper I loved that I've got sitting in front of me here, actually. Now, I've rung this individual and had the chat and asked whether I could, use this as an example, because I'm very passionate about caliper now, 20 years after the first instance. And I just, it staggers me that more businesses, even especially in the real estate game, don't use this tool, because it's a remarkable tool.
Well, this is a tool though that I think more people are becoming aware of. But if you're a real estate agency, it's not cheap, and
$500 a pop, roughly.
And you're looking at doing this for someone that you're potentially looking to hire now.
So we've burned heaps of cash where we've done the caliper and haven't made the hire.
Correct.
In fact, we did one yesterday.
But is it better to burn that money rather than spend the recruiter's money and then pay a recruiter and then 10 months down the track decide that they're no good and you've burnt everything and wasted 10 months.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, like the cost of recruiting is astronomical.
It's hard.
And the cost of not only recruiting, but the cost of, replacing and all of those
Training,
things. So let me talk about our old mate.
Yeah.
The great Charlotte Pascoe.
Yeah.
Who
I think she passed the red wine test too.
She did pass that. She passed the red wine test with gusto. So it's about 2010. We are in that growth phase we talked about in the podcast, the BDM podcast. We get a lead for our candidate for BDM.
Yeah.
This is for BDM for property management for those listening. So in other words, the role was to come on and list new houses for rent. Charlotte at the time was at JC, I think.
Yep.
Jealous Craig, and came for the interview. We had a very long interview that went till quite late.
Yes.
And we thought, wow, she's heaps of energy. So let's do the caliper.
Yeah.
And I remember when the caliper came back, which I happened to have sitting in front of me, and I just need to put my glasses on because I can't see it. When the caliper came back, I remember you and I like dancing around the office.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Well, they don't normally come through as strong for a role as what was said.
So Charlotte's caliper for business development, she was 99%.
Suitable.
For relationship management, 88%.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting because this is 2012 when Charlotte came with us and where she is today, which we'll touch on in a minute. So for entrepreneurial, she's almost 100 out of 100. For management, almost 100 out of 100. For sales, 100 out of 100. Task-oriented, she's around 75, 80%. So they're all fantastic benchmarks. Some of her other, her relationship management expresses opinions in an assertive manner, which is one of the caliper traits test.
I can imagine.
Yeah, right. Is 96.
There you go.
Maintains composure when faced with challenging people and situations, 100.
Yeah.
So this was for a BDM position. Her match for that role, if you remember, came back at 9.5 out of 10. And for for people listening to this and trying to get their head around caliper, in 20 years of doing caliper, Steve-O, I don't know how many we've done. It'd have to be 500.
Probably, yep.
How many 9.5s have we seen?
One.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we don't. Maybe it's two.
Yeah, maybe, but it was outstanding.
It's like a unicorn type scenario. So what's really interesting about that is some of the greatest successes we had in the business with BDM was when yourself and Charlotte, and your caliper, by the way, is not too dissimilar in some of the similar traits that what we call hunter gene. So in other words, you're born to be a hunter. Yeah. That is born within you. You can try and practice it, but if you're not born a hunter, you generally will not become a hunter.
It's the behaviours you tend to naturally.
It's your natural behaviours, which is what the caliper profile brings out. So Charlotte is not only, she's like not a natural hunter, she's a natural like assassin.
Yeah.
Like literally.
Yeah.
She's a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Kills, but with a smile on her face.
But with the empathy and the softness of a woman. Very dangerous combination.
Yeah.
Very deadly combination.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it
deadly. So you look
deadly.
at all the people that get James Bond.
Yeah.
In the it's always, the soft but evil women. I'm not saying Charlotte's, that's actually a bad analogy because she's totally not evil. She's awesome. But so Charlotte came on as BDM, killed it. You guys were listing 400, 500, 600 a year between two people. A lot of businesses dream about listing 200 or 300 a year. The two of you were doing double that for a long time. But when I look today, so Charlotte is now CEO of Stockdale Lego.
Yep.
Has been for
a couple of years, I reckon.
I'm going to say 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And if you look at her caliper today and we put it in the context of CEO.
Yeah.
So in other words, this is a BDM caliper, but if you said, we're looking, Charlotte's applying for a CEO role, what's her caliper? You would look at this and you go, you know what? This is actually not a bad CEO caliper.
Yeah. But like that, then this is the thing, like people that haven't, experienced caliber people who haven't come into contact with it, I'm sure they're sitting there going, but what is this magic device that's being used? And generally the people sit down, they do a test, and then you get a report on them based on the position that you're looking to employ them for. But they can reanalyze that for future roles, which is where at MRE we've had the ability to look at results, put somebody on as a BDM, for example, but then, or a property manager, but then look at them and go, hang on, that person's also shown leadership traits in their caliber.
We've got a lot of them
that
now.
Then you can exploit through as they develop into leadership roles within the property management department or wider.
Yes.
Same with our young guys and girls coming in that are doing livability, and then they're progressing to try and go into sales or into property management. We're able to look at them and say, okay, you'll be great, welcome aboard on merit for, to come in and begin your career.
Yep.
We can see that you've also got natural traits into this future position. So we can really put the talent where the traits lie.
So coming back to the core title of this podcast, which is a strengths-based approach, this tool gives us the ability to see your strengths, work with your strengths, and help you be the best version of yourself.
Before day one.
Because you know what working on your weaknesses does?
It's
nothing.
Not fun.
Absolutely zero.
Yeah.
You can work on your weaknesses all you want, but if you can't kick a footy on your left foot, well, guess what?
Yeah.
You can practice it and probably get a bit better, but you're never going to be great. You're never going to be a Hodgie or a
Mitchell
or a Jay Lewis. We digress. So that's a really good story. There's actually quite a few fantastic caliper stories within the MRE. For those listening, the caliper is a little tricky without being able to physically see one on paper. So if anybody that listened to this wanted to see one, I'd be happy to email them mine for fun. I mean, I'm not precious.
When you first saw yours, what was your reaction?
On some of the traits that I knew were strong, such as sort of influencing, i.e. sales, no surprise. But on some of the others, I was a little offended. Just looking at mine here now, I've got with me, my interpersonal is quite low. Now, with caliper, some of the titles cannot be read literally.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, you need to understand that what they mean, which is why caliper is such a deep tool. But when I actually just read the definition of interpersonal, it really means you're quite shy, which is right. I don't particularly like being in big groups. I don't like public speaking. I don't like being the center of attention. I just don't like it. People think you do because you're in sales, but I can't think of anything worse. I mean, my worst fear would to be famous. I'd hate that.
This podcast could go massive.
I hope not. I hope only our team listens to it and my son, and that would be great for me. But Peter at melbournerealestate.com.au. Shoot me an email and I'll send you my caliper.
It's been a fascinating tool that's been exploited over many years, and it's helped MRE put the right people in the right spots, and that's enabled us to scale faster, significantly faster than where we would have been if we didn't have the tools at our backing.
Scale faster, but also with accuracy.
Yeah.
I think most importantly with accuracy, and little small claim to fame just before we wrap up. I think 2017, 2016, when we were a team of 55 or 60, absolutely pumping caliper. We asked caliper to sort of beta test a full team overlay.
Yeah.
Where every individual in the business was overlaid with everyone else.
Yeah.
And the result, you remember the result on that?
Yeah. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at each other's caliper, and it's part of learning about your team and learning about your colleagues, because you can use it so much as a management tool, because you know that certain people are going to leave things to the last minute. You know that certain people are going to get things done fast. You know that some people hate checklists and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And you can apply that across the
I mean, I know my urgency is 100, and I know there's a particular individual I deal with a lot whose urgency is about 60, and I'm aware of that when I keep requesting things. Like, oh, they work in a different way.
Yeah.
It's really important. It's a very powerful tool. We love it. This, I'm sure, will be one of many that we do for Caliper. Working and building on people's strengths in a team is a winner.
No doubt.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
See you next week.
Over and out.